Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Dungeon Jedi Masters. Today, I'm actually going to take a look and help you design a certain aspect of your campaign. One of the biggest things I've seen on both the subreddit and Discord have been people coming in and asking for different ideas on what to base their campaign around, or things that they can kind of have their party do for an arc, just to kind of build in some of that Star Wars lore, while still being able to take it in their own direction with their campaign. So I've actually come up with four different items that we're going to talk through. A couple others I'll just kind of throw in with quick bites, but four we're really going to kind of hone in on that'll be good for your campaign. And the nice thing with these four items too, they're split between both canon and legends. So I'm more of a legends player myself, but I wanted to include some in for the canon side as well, just in case that's where you're setting your campaign at. So there'll be some great options for that too. But the really cool thing with these is that they pretty much span all eras. These are all old items that last up until for Legends to the latest version of canon, or the version of our latest timeline in Legends, and for canon are all still active and available. So this is great. So they kind of start at the beginning and go throughout that whole time period. So if you've got yours set in the Old Republic, these will work for you. If you got yours set in the Rebellion era, these will still work for you too. So I wanted to have these kind of be era agnostic. So if you're picking up a campaign in any time period, you can use these and feel comfortable that you're at least starting at a canon or a kind of confirmed time point for that item. So basically, let's kind of dive into it. So these are going to go over these kind of Star Wars MacGuffins. So if you're not familiar with the term MacGuffin, it's basically just an item that kicks off the plot or kicks off the campaign. And these ones have some pretty cool ones you can go after. So just a little table of contents. We're going to touch on the Myr Talisman. Great resource. I've actually used this or using this in one of my campaigns yet. They haven't really got to dive too deep into it, but they have encountered it. Darksaber, which I know a lot of you are familiar with, definitely been showcased a lot within uh, pretty much a lot of the TV universe with Rebels, Clone Wars, as well as The Mandalorian. So definitely a great resource there. And Dedu's Holocron. This one's a fun one. We'll touch a little bit in depth on that one too. And then the Dagger of Mortis too. So you see, kind of split between both Legends and Canon with some really cool options and things you can bring in there. But first one, the Mirror Talisman. I've never actually heard it said out loud, so I may be mispronouncing that. This is a great resource, especially if you want to have a kind of a zombie-centric campaign. The Mirror Talisman was created by Carnus Mirror, and this is a Legends item too, just to be clear. So it was created by Carnus Mirror, who's a very ancient Sith Lord. Basically, what this talisman does is he made this as he was alive, and he was able to imbue his spirit into the talisman. So he's actually possessing the talisman. So he's alive, or he's present within the talisman, we should say. So definitely his influence weighs heavily on that. But the cool thing with this is this talisman imparts some of his power into the person wielding it. And it does a couple of other cool things as well. One of the biggest being, if you're familiar with KOTOR and you've seen the Rakghouls, Mir is actually the one who designed the Rakghoul Plague. So he's the one that created that. And with his talisman, you're actually able to both control Rakghouls. So any Rakghoul he comes across, even if he converted them, if they're converted through other means, he is able to intrinsically just control them. They would obey pretty much of his every wish. The other nice thing that too is the talisman gives him the ability to infect others within his range. So going pure lore, any party that's not a force user who's within his range, he can just use the force and a mixture of his talisman to just instantly turn them into Rakghouls. Really cool stories involved in that. And one of the things I'll too and include a link in the notes as well to the Wikipedia page. They're going to go a little bit more in depth. But there's definitely a couple cool stories if you're going to use this. I'd recommend checking out outside of just the Wikipedia page. The biggest one being the Legacy of the Force series. The Mirror Talisman played a pretty significant role in this. So some cool stuff you can learn about there, just how it's used and really how to pick it up and put it in your campaign. But what I like with this one, though, is a lot of D&D campaigns resolve around zombies or necromancers and things like that. Where in Star Wars, there's really not that many things to choose from that reflect that. But with the Mirror Talisman, you've got a thing that can create zombies and give him an undead zombie army, and that could really be a good call to action for your players. You kind of start off the campaign with hearing reports of an infectious plague spreading on some colony or some planet in the outer rim or wherever you want to have it, and you're going to send the players there to investigate it. They can investigate it, fight some radicals, and find out somehow that there's somebody in control of it. You could either have in canon, or Legends canon, I should say, most of the time the Mirror Talisman, because Mirror died and imparted himself into the talisman. It was usually wielded by Celeste Morn, who was a Jedi, Old Republic Jedi, who took the talisman and kind of took that burden upon herself. In your campaign, and that's one of the biggest things too when building a Star Wars campaign, I always use both Legends or canon as a starting point for my stories. Never let it kind of dictate what you want to do. So basically, in your campaign, if you wanted to have Celeste Morn still be the person wielding the Morn Talisman and kind of fighting off his influence, you can do so. In my campaign, I actually just had like another person take control of it and trying to fight off the influence, but it's still unconsciously spreading that Rakghoul plague. So you can do it either way, but this is kind of a cool way just to kind of continually build up to the parties. They'll kind of see where he's been before, have to fight off some Rakghouls, and then eventually they'll get the shot at taking out whoever's wielding that talisman. Nice thing with this one too is this is going to be one of those items, and I think I've got a draft for it. I'll post that up here too, just kind of some descriptions for the item. But this is one of those OP items that'd be kind of fun to actually let your party get a hold of, because the big thing is even if they defeat whoever's wielding the Mirror Talisman, Carnus Moore is still in the talisman. So if you give it to one of your players and they actually put it on and start using it, you've got a fun possession angle to do with your campaign and have them fight off his influence. And eventually, they're going to wind up losing that battle, and that can definitely be a new arc for your campaign too. So this was just fun. It combines a lot of traditional D&D items, a very powerful magic item or force imbued item, I should say, for this game. Uh, Zombies and the Rakghouls, and just really can up the stakes. And you could really have kind of show just the different kind of carnage and terror that whoever's wielding this is spreading to the population, and just really hype your PCs up when they get to take them down. So this is one of my favorites. With my campaign that I'm running it at, I'm only at the part where teasing it. They've fought some Rakghouls. They've seen the person who's currently wielding it. But he was able to get off planet before they were able to get there. So they're going to have to kind of chase him down when he eventually resurfaces. So definitely one I highly recommend, especially for a Legends campaign. Oh, and the cool thing is this didn't get destroyed until the Legacy of the Force comic series, which is I think is like 150 years after the Battle of Yavin. So created about 4 or 5 thousand years before the Phantom Menace, and then around till after the Battle of Yavin, or 150 years after the Battle of Yavin. So pretty much any time period this works well with. So no worries on that side. It's always kind of floating around somewhere in the galaxy. So the next item we're going to touch on, this one's going to be really familiar for most people, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, is the Darksaber. This is a great item to use for a campaign. One of the biggest reasons I like this for a campaign is especially with a lot of the new Disney canon TV shows and comic books and all of that. It's super familiar. So like a lot of the other items that we have on here, like the Mirror Talisman and Indebted's Holocron, uh, they're kind of for legend walks. So people who've really kind of read into legends, they'll know about it. But for these ones, if you didn't want to have a to be a surprise or didn't want to go in depth explaining the importance to your players, this can be a great option to do so. Since if you're playing with some Star Wars people, if they've given new canon a shot, they've seen the Darksaber at some point or time, either through Rebels, the Clone Wars, or the Mandalorian. So definitely one I recommend. And the cool thing too, this is a great way to bring in the Mandalorians. And if you do have a player who's starting off as a Mandalorian, this could be kind of a cool item to bring them, kind of give them kind of their own little destiny, your own little side quest. If they really want to unite the tribes or become Mandalore, this could be something fun to do that with. Uh, this one's a cool one too, especially depending on the era that you're doing it in. You could even have it like, let's say you're doing it before the Clone Wars, like way back in the Old Republic period. This could be a cool way to bring in the Mandalorians, have them initially, whoever's wielding that Darksaber, be a thorn in the side of the party. You can even have them set up as that big bad. And then eventually that party takes them down, they get that Darksaber, and then kind of that what's next. And then you can kind of set them up on their own little quest to do whatever they want to do with the saber. Do they want to become the new Mandalore? Or are they just trying to be a badass Mandalorian? Uh, that's kind of up to them. They can decide what they want to do with that Darksaber. And the nice thing too is it's going to put a target on their back because the other Mandalorians or even other people who want to utilize the Mandalorian skills, the Sith, other bounty hunters, other factions in the world are going to be after whoever's wielding that blade to try to get that influence and that power. So definitely some really cool things you can do with that. And as I said, super recognizable. We've already got a stat block in it for in the SW5E system, so you can just go to sw5e.com and pull that up. So just a really cool way to give an item that people are going to recognize and you can really use it to drive the story. Or even if you don't want to have it drive the story, just have another item there and you can kind of pull plot points out of it when you need to. So definitely one I'd check out. And even if you're doing Legends canon, it technically fits into both since the Clone Wars TV series kind of falls on both sides. So you can utilize that as well if you want to. This one's one of my favorites. This one's actually one I've used for my first table, and I'm kind of still in the process of using them. Kind of it played out in a way different way than I expected it to, so it's gonna be fun to see how this one shakes out. But this is Indedu's Holocron, or better known as the Holocron of Heresies. So Indedu was an ancient Sith Lord, similar to Carnus Moore. He died, but he was able to, for a time, kind of reanimate his body with his spirit, kind of similar to what they did with Palpatine in the Rise of Skywalker movie. So his body was dead, but he was able to reanimate for a period. But then he was tracked down by his enemies, so he had to ditch that body and put his spirit into his holocron. So holocrons are usually just kind of repositories of information. There'll be a gatekeeper there who has a personality of the person who created it, but isn't truly a living being. But that's different for the Holocron of Heresies because Ndedu actually had his true spirit, his Force essence in the Holocron. Couple cool things you can do with this. Biggest thing, or one of the most interesting things, this holocron's similar to the Moore Talisman is it's around pretty much throughout all of Star Wars history. It was created, and then it was an ancient Sith around the same time as Muir, so about 4 to 5,000 years before the Battle of Yavin or Phantom Menace, and then it was destroyed in that same comic series, Legacy of the Force, so about 150 years after the Battle of Yavin. So pretty much all of Star Wars history for many of the novels, books, comics, for Legends canon, it encapsulates this. So wherever you're setting this, this can be a cool item. One of the biggest things that this usually plays on with canon or legends was Ndedu was the creator of the Force Essence transfer technique. So that's kind of how he put himself into the holocron, how he repossessed his body. And then the cool thing with this, though, is a number of different people learned that technique from the holocron, and that can be something your players could even pick up from the holocron as well if they're high enough level. But Darth Bane, Darth Sidious, Set Hart, all learned how to transfer their essence from their body to another using that Force Essence technique that they picked up from Ndedu. So kind of a cool technique that you can kind of bring in there and kind of give some flavor to it. Uh, but the big thing with this too is since his spirit is still in there and his body was actually preserved, kind of mummified, he's trying his best to get back to Praketh, which is the planet that he used to rule as the king of, and that's where his tomb is and where his body is located at. So you can kind of have your players come across this item, and then either through trickery or just kind of somehow you can convince the party to bring them to that planet and bring back his body, or even if he's not with his body, he can just use his holocron to kind of sow dissent or try to turn the players to the dark side. This can just be kind of a cool way to kick off the campaign, and they can somebody finding this holocron and then kind of kicking them off on their journey. The way I've actually used it in my campaign, very similar. So they found this holocron when they raided a Sith ship. So it was kind of a little dungeon crawl through this Sith ship, and this Sith was a uh, pretty much like a little bit different than typical Sith. He was more of a kind of a researcher, like he was a Sith alchemist, so he did a lot of different research and a lot of different projects, which were kind of things that the party had to fight as they were going through his ship. But in his study, after they killed him, they find this holocron. So in my campaign, I kind of tweaked it a little bit. So you see in the picture that this is kind of a pyramid style, typical Sith Holocron business. But I actually had, I said that Endedu, who's in the comics or in the legends, master of illusions. So I said he used some of his Force essence or Force power to make an illusion so it didn't look so Sithy. So they just saw it as a typical Holocron. Uh, and basically, what they did is they took it on. So after they beat this dungeon, they actually leveled up to level 8. So I offered them that Ndedu, in his kind of bountiful mercy, said, I will be able to teach you new skills that I possessed in life if you would study with me. So, with them being at level 8, I gave them the option if they wanted to, if they'd rely on Ndedu's teachings, they could take both the feat and the ABI. And what I had them do with that is he'd teach them the kind of that feat or the that they were looking for, but after they did so, they had to roll an insight save, or sorry, wisdom save on him to see if they're kind of falling under his guise or if they're kind of accepting some of his teachings. And the big thing with that was after he kind of indebted himself, or the party indebted himself to him, they learned a lot of his different teachings, and a number of them failed as wisdom saves. I actually started having him kind of mess with the party and do different things that were aligned with his goals, eventually winding up with him on Perketh. He was able to use his influence on the party to, while they're sleeping, convince the pilot to take him to Perketh, and he was able to get his body back. Uh, so that's currently where they're at. They actually had to flee the planet. They kind of went a little sideways on him. The mission to try to retrieve the holocron before his body got back. So they had to flee before kind of getting in touch with them. So he's actually has his body back, and he's going to be kind of a new force in the galaxy once we get back to kind of his arc. So I'll let you guys get a little update on that, how it goes. But this is just a fun one since he can bring himself back to life, that Force Essence technique, and then the Holocron. There's just so many different angles you can do with this. And it's kind of a fun either arc in your campaign, or you can even have this be kind of a core cornerstone of your campaign with Ndedu trying to do something with the Holocron. So the next one, you guys will recognize this from the Clone Wars, but that's the Dagger of Mortis. So this is a great item if you want to kind of do that typical D&D thing where the players want to set out and kill a god, or in this case, the ones who are n- near invulnerable or very powerful force beings. So they debuted in the Clone Wars series where Anakin and Obi-Wan wound up on the planet of Mortis, and this can just be kind of a great way to give that mythical feel to your Star Wars campaign. And the cool thing is, this one fits into canon as well, too, since it showed up in the Clone Wars. So the Dagger of Mortis, basically just kind of a quick run through of it. It's one of the only things that's capable of killing the ones. They usually can't be killed by traditional means, so if your party tries to run up on them with a lightsaber, even if they may hit them some damage, they're not going to be able to kill them with their lightsaber. They're going to need to hunt down that Dagger of Mortis. So this is kind of a cool campaign idea if you wanted to have either, let's say, the son just decides to disobey the father and just goes off, and he was gonna just truly unbalance the force and just increase the power of the dark side. You can even have it say that he killed the father and as well as the sister, and now he's just completely unhinged, just bringing chaos and destruction to the galaxy. You can have your players try to go through and hunt down the Dagger of Mortis, and that could be kind of one of their big quest items to find this, so they're able to be prepared and be able to kill the Sith when they finally do face the Son in battle. Or even flip it another way. I know the dark side's always the thing that gets is usually the kind of the impetus for an adventure, but maybe it could be the father's gone crazy. Or if you really wanted to have a fun twist, the daughter is kind of fallen from her path. She hasn't gone to the dark side, but she feels that the best way to kind of spread the power, the message of the light, is to just take complete control. And then she's just kind of gone unhinged and really brought chaos to the galaxy, or just truly unbalanced the force. So this could definitely some cool items and really just gives that good mythical feel with going up against not just a Sith Lord, you're going up against the embodiment of the dark side or light side or balance or whichever way you want to go with it. So definitely one I recommend is a cool campaign item. Just kind of sets them off. They've got to find that dagger. You could even make them have to spend some time on how to use it or in tune to it and seek out just different sources of wisdom within the galaxy to get prepared for that. So those are the four big items I think could be a good fit for a campaign. Other items that I think if you wanted to kind of build your own, holocrons are always a good way to go for both cannons. They're just great repositories of information and resources, and a lot of times even if they don't have a presence in them like in Deadu, they still do have kind of a connection to the Force that can be used to their dark side to kind of tweak the party's mood or kind of push them further toward. Yeah, so just different things you can do with it. One cool thing I really like from the new canon that I think could fit really well to a D&D campaign is if you guys have watched Rebels, if you combine a Sith holocron with a Jedi holocron, you get a vision of the future. You can kind of peer into the future. So that's kind of a cool thing to do, especially if you've got some crazy event going on. Let's say there's a world devastating or galaxy devastating event, and the party needs to get some more information, but they just don't have anybody around that can kind of steer them towards that. You could set them on a quest to find both the Sith and the Jedi holocron and combine them, and that'll get them that information they need. But definitely outside of those, there's just a ton of different items in Star Wars that you can use just to get that campaign set up and just give them a little kind of that MacGuffin, that push to get out the door and get everything rolling. My two favorites, and I've touched on those already, are the Mirror Talisman. That's I think a cool one, especially if you want to bring in the Rackles. Definitely the way I do it. And then Deadu's just a fun Sith Lord, and I've got him statted up too. I'll include his block in there. I've got mirrors as well, so I'll include both those in the links to the YouTube video. But both are just great ways to get the party moving, set them up against an big bad, and the cool thing with this too is the big bad's either in holocron form or the Mir Talisman, and both of those are incredibly hard to destroy just outright. So they can it kind of gives them a big bad that can still pop up and talk crap, but can't really be taken out right away until they get their body back from Andedu or possess somebody strong enough in the Force from Mir. So yeah, those are the big ones. Definitely, if you guys have any others that you like in the from Star Wars lore, feel free to post those down in the comments. Other things I'd highly recommend checking out. We got the podcast every Tuesday. This week we're going to be posting up. We actually have Gally, or the Star Wars 5e creator, jumping on board with us. So that'll be dropping Tuesday, I think that's the 21st. So check that out. He's going over some big changes to the PHB and just some other cool tips and tricks he's picked up with developing the system. So highly recommend you join us for that. Other thing too, I want to give a shout out to our Patreon subscribers. We really appreciate you there. If you are interested in being a Patreon subscriber, we've got a lot of cool resources that come along with that. We actually have a couple adventures that are posted up there, as well as some NPCs that you can use for your campaign. Each month, we either drop a new NPC or a new adventure. So, if you're just getting started as a DM and want to have some pre-made adventures or one-shots to use in your campaign, working with us on the Patreon side can be a good way to get that information. Just really be able to kind of have some good resources. One thing we're going to be starting too is actually posting for our Patreon subscribers just kind of a lessons learned video too, where Todd and I will both go through our different campaigns, just post on some different lessons or tips and tricks we picked up, or just kind of go over what we planned for that session, how it went, and things we'd like to have changed, or just kind of heads up about things that can kind of improve. Really, we gotta make sure it knocks it out of the park or kind of detract from your campaign. Because even if you're an experienced DM, there's gonna be sessions you have where you drop the ball on something, or something just didn't go the way you liked it to, or on the other side it went really well, and those would be just kind of a good area we can share those and kind of pass them on to you guys. But overall, we appreciate you all listening and checking in with us, and definitely thank you for watching this video. Definitely there'll be a couple links in the comments or the description, so check those out as well. But may the force be with you.